I joined Ilford, it was as a trainee secretary. I never really wanted to do office work because I didn't like typing or anything like that. My dream was always to work in a bank. So I joined Ilford Films because it was a job that became available, but I only stayed there for about 8 months. I worked in the patterns department, and I went to East Ham College every Thursday to do office practice. I had a day release to do office practice where I did typing and shorthand and just generally office practice. I hated it. Well, I came in through the front, and then there was a stairway, and I think my building was the first floor. It was the first floor.
First floor.
Yeah, it was definitely the first floor. I was responsible for filing the patents when they were being developed in the various stages, like for the pending, and then once something had been approved, I would take it out the pending and put it in the approved. So it was rows and rows of not shelves, like pockets, and I had to put all the different things in the different pockets.
What was your social life time at that time?
We didn't have one. I was a 16-year-old Caribbean girl. I had to look up, I had to be at home. I helped look after my brother and sisters while my parents went out to work.
So you mentioned that you were approached for a photo test to check how black skin came up in Ilford film.
Yes.
Do you remember that day very well?
I remember some of it, but not with any glee because I was so scared. I didn't know what to expect, but I felt that I was coaxed into it. I wasn't forced, but I was coaxed into it. So, but there was 2 others. There's another one that's a different pose, and I think that was a different pose as well. I was brought up by my grandparents and my aunts, and my dad was still out there. Lots of family, but one of the things we did was to share our memories. So we used to I always used to take photos to send back home. So that's how the photography thing came. I wouldn't call it photography because it really wasn't photography, but just to keep our overseas family in the loop, we used to take photos and send them out.
How did you meet Graeme?
He played in a band.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually in the area very well known. They were very, very well respected band. They'd been on telly. They'd been in the talent thing on the television. And I went. My best friend at the time, her brother was like their roadie. And one day she said, "Oh, we're going down to Croydon to watch them play. Do you want to come?" And I went, and that's how I met him. Was playing down at Croydon.
There you go. Oh, that should be. What are your fondest memories of working at Ilford?
I think the people there, they were quite a good crowd, and there weren't many comings and goings. We all sort of stayed together, and because a lot of them had come in from the East End of London, they were quite funny. They were quite characters.
So what were your day-to-day jobs sort of like?
And I would literally type letters of his, take phone calls still from customers. I also worked the trade counter. It wasn't that busy at Ilford. The London one was, an actual busy shop. I mean, it was open the whole time. But the Ilford one, someone would just literally ring a bell and I would go and serve them at the counter.
Your father and your grandfather also worked there, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What jobs did they do?
My grandfather, I think, was the home sales manager. I think he actually had quite an important job.
My father-in-law brought home photographs of Princess Diana in a crowd one day, and getting that was a hell of a coup for the photographer. And when I joined Ilford, we all went through a 6-week induction course, and the person that ran that, his name was Bill Calder. And we spent a lot of time learning about photography, learning about the company. And really, I think the idea was for us to learn in those 6 weeks what our customers of Ilford Limited were going to do. We had to learn about some chemistry associated with photography. There was a lot of physics. We learnt about colour. Colour film was a bit of a rarity in those days, fairly expensive to do, mostly slides. After the induction and during all the time at college, I worked in a laboratory, and all of us worked for people higher up. They were all Dr. something. They were the real scientists, and we were the people that put their ideas into practice. So they'd say, I wonder what happens to film if you do this, and my job would be to do that and see what effect it had. And that was life in the laboratories at Ilford.
Losing Ilford at Ilford, it was coming because they'd exhausted what they could do here. You know, the company was expanding. There was very little option as to what to do on that site. So Sainsbury's probably wanted that site. I suspect also the site was a good site to sell to somebody to redevelop it for different things. Hello, I'm Aim Burnell, born and bred in Ilford. My first job was at Ilford Limited. My first memory walking through that door in Roden Street was, this is the start of working life. Looking forward to it. I was greeted by the personnel officer called Joe Emery, and then Joe took me over to the office block across the car park to be handed over to John Hudson, who was the chief programmer. And then John walked me around the office, introducing me to various people, one of which was Avril Nelson.
And I had a friend who worked at Ilford Films, and she was in the computer section. And she said, why don't you try programming? Because in those days you didn't need computing qualifications, you didn't need a diploma or degree in computing, you just had to do the aptitude test. That was how I then was offered a job at Ilford Films. So I did get actually 3 job offers, but I wanted Ilford Limited because it was local to where I lived in Barking. Ilford Limited, it kind of is Ilford. Everyone that worked there, they were sort of like families. You didn't just get one person working there. I mean, in Eamon's case, he probably did. I think he was the only member.
People recognised that I was young and didn't have, I wasn't worldly. I know it sounds crazy, but I wasn't. So I was looked after. Ilford Limited was advanced in its management theory and thinking. The computers did things like, there's 2 main systems, Scope and Scoop. Scope was stock control, order processing, etc. I think that stood for. So that processed all the orders for Ilford products, and fed the Scoop system, which did the stock control and replenishment of stock. Scope also fed the invoicing systems, and the invoicing systems fed the accounting systems that Mary referred to.
In the old days, there was a computer department with huge machines. I think it must have been in the basement. Everybody had a customer number, 8-figure customer number, say ICI 2002 3036. Remember from all those years ago. And I started off in amateur service department. Amateurs would send in queries and films and problems, and then if they're necessary they would send them to the lab. Then I went in the typing pool.
When you say typing pool, what is that?
So people on typewriters, and they used to, if people wanted work done, then they would come to the typing pool to get it typed. So it's just like a group of people, really.
For you, why didn't you want to be a part of that pool?
Felt as if you were like mass production, much better to be working for somebody.
And how long was your working life at Ilford?
17 years, 1958 to we made redundant in 76, I think it was, yeah.
So you would have been made redundant around the time that Ilford left
Yes,
Essex.
that's it, yeah.
How did it feel for you?
Oh, really sad. Yes, because I mean, it was a sort of family atmosphere. When I went to the next job, it was so alien. It was good firm to work for, and most of my friends now were all from Ilford Limited. So worked together for all those years. So Brenda Payton was one. She was in the export department.
I worked my way through the departments, but purely on export. And in 1965, the company decided that Ilford Limited would be the first company to put export on computerisation. And my boss, Les Watson, he wasn't interested in computerisation. He wanted the old-fashioned way. So he asked me if I'd take over the project, which I did. And I worked with a New Zealand guy. I can't remember his name now. He was brilliant. And the two of us set up the computerisation for export. And we exported all over the world then. Mary Davis, who is a great friend of mine, and you met her. And Mary came down here. She took Anderson and I out for lunch for her 80th birthday. And that is when she told me all about this project. And there again, as I say, you work there for life. You know, I mean, if I'd have carried on, I would have worked there till I retired. I never ever intended to leave because I was quite happy there, and I enjoyed being a supervisor because I am rather bossy.
That's it. We're done. Thank you so much, Mary. Really
I'm
appreciate it.
because
I'm
I
really
love London.
excited to see those.
I'm a freeman of the City of London, so I can
Ah.
drive my sheep over London Bridge.
Yes.